Welcome to Scrolling to Death, everybody. We are very lucky to be joined today by a child protection and advocacy expert, also executive director of World Childhood Foundation USA, Dr. Mary Pulido. Hi, Mary.
Hi, thank you, Nicki. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really thrilled.
Me too. Let's learn about the World Childhood Foundation first, which I was lucky enough to partner with for a spring luncheon couple months ago. Time flies. But tell me about World Childhood Foundation and what you guys focus on.
Absolutely. World Childhood Foundation is one of the few foundations in the world whose sole focus is to eliminate or prevent child sexual abuse and exploitation, both in person and online. We just hit our 25th year anniversary, funded by Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden. And now Princess Madeline, her daughter, and Queen Sylvia work throughout the world on this issue, advocating for change, for laws, for programs that will stop child sex abuse and exploitation, and programs that will help survivors of it heal. And we really are looking at sort of three main areas. One is online protections for children, which we'll talk more about today.
Yeah.
And then the other is we're looking at all types of prevention programs for children. And we're not just focused on sort of what people think of when they think of prevention is the traditional prevention program geared towards children and parents and teachers, but we're also funding initiatives for perpetrator prevention for adults and initiatives for children with problematic sexual behaviors, because we're looking at this as a public health crisis. Child sexual abuse has reached epidemic proportions. It's a crisis. So we are looking at also not just funding the need for children to be protected from it and learn the red flags and learn what grooming looks like, and to help the teachers and the parents and concerned family members and adults help protect children. But we need to stop the influx of perpetrators.
Okay.
So we also fund research in those two areas, which I think is critically important to increasing the knowledge in the field as to what works, what doesn't work, so that we can try to stop the problem on protecting children, but at the same way stopping the offenders from offending.
Yeah, thank you. That's incredible. And, to back up even further, you also served as executive director for the first child protection agency in the world called the New
Yes.
York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. So you've been in this a while, and I often think about how drastically the harms to children have changed, the threats, the spaces, the addition of online harms. So can you talk a little bit about what stands out to you about the evolution of these threats to our kids?
Absolutely. First, I just want to reiterate some very basic facts, but child abuse affects every age, gender, background of children. No one is sort of immune from, sadly, being subjected to child sexual abuse or exploitation. Infants, toddlers, to teenagers, boys and girls, every gender. Certain populations are at higher risk. LGBTQ plus children, children that are homeless, children that are in foster care, children with disabilities are considered at higher risk. But sort of across the board, sadly, it's reached epidemic proportions. I think another thing that I would just like people to understand is that when I grew up, I could go home, and if I was safe at home, it was mainly perpetration was happening in person.
Right.
There was no such thing as cell phones and iPads, and yes, there were computers, but it wasn't something that children had. So children were considered safe You played board games, you rode your bikes, you played with other children in the neighborhood.
Yep.
And now, the threats to children are very different. They're online, they're constant, they're on the cell phone, they're through the iPad, they're through games, they're on the computer, and the types of child sexual abuse have also changed. We're looking at extortion now, sexual extortion, financial extortion. We're looking at child sex trafficking, all of the AI, the deep fake nude problems,
Mhm.
the images that are being circulated by children. We're looking at children innocently, not even understanding that they're being groomed online, and then the worst happens to them. So the explosion of child sex abuse online has grown exponentially. I just read a study from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland where they said more than 300 million children a year are going to experience some type of online child sexual abuse and exploitation.
Oh my god.
So,
Oh.
and just another fact that I think is important to realize is that the FBI has also said that in any given day, there are 500,000 offenders online.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's any given day.
Yeah.
So, in the past, how things have changed is you had your child inside, your child was, you considered your child safe.
Uh-huh.
And now your child's inside, but they're on their phone or their iPad or gaming. But the realization is that there are 500,000 offenders trying to get to children every single day.
Right. How often are those online predatory, experiences turning into real world threats? I just read this morning, a Snapchat predator targeted a 15-year-old on Snapchat, and they met at the park and it turned into like an in-person sexual encounter. And so are you seeing a high percentage of that, or are they staying online?
When I started really looking into this issue, maybe 10, 12 years ago,
Mhm.
what they were reporting was a lower percentage of offenders who were actually making sort of the switch from going online to going in person.
Mhm.
And now what some of the research is saying is that it's as high as like 40% to 60% of offenders that are online are actually trying to make contact with children in person. And there's one study that I found really, I think it's important for your parents to sort of understand
Mhm.
what's being the research on offenders.
Mhm.
And there was a major study published last year from a group in Finland. Okay, it was called the Redirection Project. That was the name of the study. But they obtained survey data anonymously online on the dark net from 30,000 offenders.
Oh my. Okay.
They were able to get this data, and it to me, it sort of made a light bulb go off on, okay, so if they're saying this is what happened to them, these are more steps we can try to figure out how to protect children.
Yeah.
Like 50% of the people that answered this survey said that they were first exposed to sexual abuse materials accidentally online. They weren't searching for them. They simply popped up in their feed. And the majority of them, 70%, said they were under the age of 18 when they first experienced child sex abuse material.
Wow.
All
So
right.
these
And
algorithms are grooming them into becoming child predators?
I think that's one way you have to look at it
Wow.
because they were not searching for it. It came up. And then they continued to search for it, and they then took part of the survey. They were also searching primarily for girls, CSAM between the girls the ages of 4 to 13,
Mm.
and they wanted to many of them, 50% said they wish they could stop, but they only it was a small percentage, I think 25 to 28% said they wanted to they were going to seek help. And then 40% said they sought contact with a child after viewing CSAM. It's changed, but parents, what it comes down to is that parents really need to understand that these offenders are grooming children, and they want to see these children. They want to get their hands on these children.
Mm.
So we have to take more steps to be involved in what the parents' knowledge is.
Yeah.
When I was at that former agency that you were talking about, the New York Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, I helped design a nationwide poll. This was probably back in around 21, 22. And the poll was on parents' perception of online child sex abuse and exploitation. And the majority of parents said, we do not feel equipped to figure out and protect our children online.
Mhm.
Help. I mean,
Yeah.
basically what they were saying was help.
Yeah.
It's the children know more than we do. I don't have time, they don't have time,
Mhm.
that they don't understand the programs, that
Yeah.
they think their children are safe, but they're not sure. And then another point out of that survey that I remember was that they really wish the schools would take a bigger role in like mandating online education for children
Yeah.
because they didn't feel equipped to do it.
Yeah. I wish that every day because it feels like, with my school, I had to request an online safety training. And then half the time, the man that presented talked about how great ChatGPT was and showed us how to use it. And I was like, this is not online safety training. So there's a definite gap there. And parents do need help. I mean, this is overwhelming what we're talking about so far. And parents might be like, how do I even deal with this? Or they might be like, that's not going to happen to my child. And my child is smarter than that. They'll notice it, or I'm going to protect them. They're not on those platforms. But those platforms where kids are getting targeted are the ones our kids are spending time on, right? The
That's right.
Roblox, the social media platforms.
If you look at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children,
Mm.
that's a great website for parents. First of all, they have like a whole parent guide on breaking down
Okay.
all the
Hmm.
different types of exploitation. They also have sort of like hint tips on this is how you start to talk to your children about this if you're stuck and you don't have the language. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
like that, but the other thing that they do is, they break down where are all the cyber tip reports coming from, and what platforms are they coming from, so that parents can, go online and just say, "Oh, look at all the ones that are coming in from Facebook, or look at the ones that are coming in from different places." Sadly, there was a decline in 2024 of like I think it dropped from like 36 million cyber tips down to 29 million.
Mm.
And we didn't think we would see that drop because the Report It Act
Hmm.
was put into place. But it's still an alarming number, and
Yeah.
parents need to be aware that it's through the gaming systems, it's through, the TikTok and the Snapchat and the Facebook and all of the platforms that you wouldn't necessarily think. I think parents still think it's all on the dark net,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
sadly, it's not. So they have to sort of be
Mhm.
aware of that, and, go on Thorne's website. They've got a great website too. They have an
Mhm.
amazing parent guide for
Okay. Okay.
for children.
And I'll include those resources in the episode notes. But for some tips today, obviously, parents' first step would be don't let your children on the platforms where kids are getting targeted. But kids are smart. They find their way around it. They go on their school issued device or they use their friend's device. And so I think one of the most important things, and you probably agree, is the conversations and educating your children on what to look out for and how to handle it. And so, what tips do you have for parents today that they can take away regarding those conversations?
I think the most important thing is talking to your children.
Mhm.
Is to keep the communication going, keep the communication open. What are they doing online? Who are they playing with? Who are their friends? How did they make these friends? Do they, the other thing too is that, children really believe that people that they've never met in person now are their friends.
Yes.
And I think parents need to understand and stay away from sort of the stranger danger in a way regarding who they're playing the games with, because for the children, rather than I think frame it as these are strangers, they can be harmful to you.
Mhm.
It's probably better to say, who are your online friends,
Mhm.
and tell me about your conversations, and then to talk to them more about like the red flag behaviors
Yeah.
that they
Okay.
should be looking for.
Mhm. Right.
Because, when you look, I'm reading the research all the time. A lot of children really feel that these online friends are their close friends.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
don't see them as being strangers. So
Yeah.
parents are in the mentality, you don't know them, they're a stranger.
Mhm.
But the children are more like, no, I do know them. They're my friends. I play with them online.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of get that language sort of together.
Okay.
I think you need to talk about what grooming looks like and how it can happen, and that they, keep that again. Let them know if someone is all of a sudden offering them gifts or wants them to go to a chat room or move them
Move
from
them.
being
Yeah.
online to offline, that
Yep.
those are behaviors that are dangerous or
Mhm.
risky, and that the parents wanna know about them right away. So
Yes.
I would say teaching them about the whole grooming issue, I think, is really important. Setting boundaries with your children, there has to be a time when they're not on their phones, when
Yeah.
the phones aren't allowed, or in the bedroom. When you're going to sleep, you're going to sleep. You do
Yeah.
not have your iPad and your phone in your bed with you when you go to sleep. You had said this very clearly in the luncheon, that it's really important to say it's okay to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
That no, this
Right.
is you don't need your phone all the time, or your iPad, or I really admire what you are doing by having, no, this is not what we do in this home,
Mhm.
and this is why.
Yeah, and it's to protect you, and I
That's
know
right.
it's hard sometimes, especially when they get a little older and all their friends are on social media and maybe you've decided not to let them on until 16, and you can acknowledge that and tell your child, "I know that it's hard to not be on Roblox at 8 like all your friends are, but we're trying to keep you safe, and I will help you connect with your friends in other ways." But it's okay to be confident in telling them no and sticking to that, but, like, explaining that to them why. And they may not be happy about it, but they'll thank you one day because that's what I keep hearing is these Gen Z kids who they're either like, "I wish I wasn't on there so early," or, "I'm so glad my parents had parental controls and limits."
Your messages were heard loud and clear at the luncheon. I
Thank you.
did, speak with someone after the luncheon who immediately went home and went on to Roblox, and her children will, I don't think, be on Roblox for a long time to come,
Oh, good.
because she actually saw all of the horrific
Very
dangers that you were referencing.
yeah. And that's the thing, once you go on and check just go on and use it yourself for 10, 20 minutes,
Right.
and you'll be like, "Wait a minute. I didn't realize," and that's understandable because it's marketed to children, so why would there be that type of thing on there? But it is, unfortunately, and that's the hard truth that we have to cut it out at these young ages and have these conversations, and I'm so glad you talked about the signs of grooming. Moving kids to another platform is a huge one, telling them to keep if anyone tells you a secret that you have to keep from your parents. I had an interview with a grooming expert, Anna Sonoda, and she has a book called Duck, Duck, Groom that I really recommend, and for you too, Mary. It breaks it down really clearly for parents. What do you think about like the parental monitoring services? Because I know there's a new one called Game Safe that parents can put on the gaming platforms that can send alerts if there's grooming type conversations going on or cyberbullying. Do you think that we can rely on some parental controls to help us?
If you're very tech savvy and this is what you're comfortable doing,
Yeah.
that might be helpful, but I have to go back on what I saw in that national national poll that parents were just saying, "I'm overwhelmed, it's too much."
Yeah.
And the other thing that for parents that aren't extremely tech savvy is things change so quickly
Mhm.
that what they're learning one day, they may have to alter a little bit, in the next month or so. So there's, I think for some people, they might be good resources, but I
Mhm.
think for many parents
Yeah.
who are coming home from work or, busy with more than one child or trying to juggle, a million things at once, as many parents are. I would say they should probably look at them and see if they could keep them,
Yeah.
put them on and
Yeah.
use some type of parental monitoring, but I really think that keeping the children off the phone and talking to them is important. And
Mhm.
one other point that I think is really critical for parents to understand is that it is never the child's fault.
Yes, good.
And
Mhm.
I never. A
Mhm.
child is never responsible for their own abuse.
Mm.
There is manipulation and coercion
Mhm.
that children are unable to understand and process going on, and that parents also have to understand. I mean, they're children,
Mhm.
and that's why I think parents have to also protect the children and keep them off these
Yeah.
devices as long as humanly possible. When they're young, the little ones, they just can't possibly comprehend what's going on. When
Right.
children are, under the age of 10, their brains are not even, their brain isn't fully developed till you're in your mid-20s.
Right.
And even when they're the teenage years, you're programmed to sort of push back and take risks and say, "Oh, this
Mhm.
won't happen to me," or "I've got this."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily so, but I think sometimes parents will say, "Well, I told them don't do that, so we've got this covered."
Yeah.
And then the parents are upset, which then adds to the child's guilt. So
Mhm.
if there was another message I could send out to parents is it doesn't mean what you're telling your children to be, safe is not getting through. It's that they're children.
Yeah. Yeah, and the impulse control is not there.
That's right,
Yeah.
but that it's never their fault,
Right.
and I think another really key message is that we'll get through this together.
Mhm. Mhm.
That, okay, mistakes were made, but we're gonna get through this together, and thank you for telling me, I'm here
Mhm.
for you. When you look at all the families that we were talking about earlier and the survivor families, very often when a child commits suicide or something, horrific like that happens to a child after being online, they probably we were thinking, I there's no way out.
Yeah.
There's no way out. And so parents, I think if they can just reinforce there is a way out, we're in this together, we're going to get through this. That's probably the best way to go about handling a disclosure from your child or however you find out about it after something happens online.
Yeah, and this is so relevant because you shared, 300 million children every year are encountering some type of online child sexual abuse encounter. And it's something that the kids are going to be really scared to tell you about, or may not even know that it was wrong, may be convinced that it was okay. And that's something that I hear over and over again is for parents to take a deep breath. No matter what, the kids are going to encounter something online that is scary to you and alarming to you, but taking that deep breath and not reacting out of anger at the child, no matter what they may have shared or said, that is so important because then when something worse happens, they'll come to you and tell you. And a lot of this is on parents right now because there's kind of a lack of laws and legislation to help protect our kids online. Can you give us some advice on what support we have as parents? And we talked about some of the parent guides already, but anything else related to mental health support, law enforcement, any legislation that can help us out through this struggle?
Ryan Ellis was on the panel with you.
Yeah.
So he gave us some, just I think good tips overall, but there was one thing that he said that really resonated with me was about parents having the talk about keeping children safe the same way they do about drugs, the same way they do about everything from crossing the street when you're a child
Mhm.
all the way up to drugs and alcohol and firearm safety.
Yeah.
So I think that is really important for parents to understand. The other thing too is that parents can get involved legislatively.
Yeah, thank you.
Should they choose to?
Mhm.
There are websites. In fact, I did write down a few. Hold on a minute. Let me just
Okay.
grab this. Oh, wait, there's a few things I wrote down. First of
Okay.
all, what parents should be doing is watching your podcasts,
Oh,
okay?
thank you,
That's
Mary.
that's that's number 1 because they will learn a lot, and everyone likes to listen to podcasts. So I have down Nikki's podcast. Everyone should be listening to them. And then the NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Thorn has an amazing parent guide. The FBI also has a great parent guide.
Okay.
But legislatively, there was a website called enoughabuse.org
Okay.
where they actually have a map of the United States that's interactive. So you can put in your state and you can look at some of the state laws and what they are criminalizing AI and CSAM and what are the states doing or not doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. The Kids Online Safety Act, I think, is
Mhm.
another one that, would really require much more of the social media platforms and other online services to take charge of protecting children that are online.
Yeah.
They should find out more about that. It's called KOSA,
Mhm.
KOSA, Kids Online Safety Act.
Yep.
Another item that Childhood is funding, and we're going to have the full research up on our website in September, is called Out of the Shadows Index.
Okay.
And the Out of the Shadows Index, we're funding The Economist Impact in London to look at all 50 states in the United States and look at their laws on protecting children from child sex abuse and exploitation, both online and in person. They are ranking every state. We've already done 28 states. We've just finished the 50. We're going to announce
Wow.
and have all the results of September. Sadly, the majority of the states received a grade of F.
Oh god.
And they
Okay.
looked at 170 indicators,
Mhm.
but parents will be able to go to their state and click on it and look at all the legislation for
Mhm.
that's protecting children or not protecting children that
Mhm.
their state has, and then be able to talk. We're also going to have an interactive piece where they can find who they need to talk
Per
to in the legislature
Yep.
so that they can then say, what's going on here?
Yep.
Why wasn't this bill passed? Why aren't teachers in schools receiving training on child sex abuse
Mhm.
identification and reporting?
Yep.
So it's really, in my mind, that's going to be a key tool
Mhm.
for parents, for advocates, for lawmakers. And then the other thing that, we're meeting with legislators as we put out this information, but
Mhm.
we're also giving them model legislation from other states.
Yeah.
We're not
Okay.
just saying, here's the problem. We're saying,
Mhm.
well, here's a problem, but here's how Delaware solved
Mm.
that problem. So
Amazing.
maybe you can now take this model legislation and try to do more with it.
Okay.
But I do think that, again, sometimes parents want to be part of something bigger.
Yeah,
And
they do.
these movements to
Mhm.
try to draw attention and change legislation and protest in front of social media companies, it's all making a difference.
Yes. And
10
and
years
it's
ago, wouldn't have happened. 5 years ago, this wouldn't have happened.
yeah, agree.
So we're sort of reaching a point now where, again, I think everyone should be talking about this to, as it was said at the spring luncheon that you're a participant, go home and talk to one person about this. I say go home and talk to 10 people about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, right.
So, because that is what will make change.
Mm,
We're reaching that tipping point where we've got to do more to protect our children.
Yeah, and parents reach out all the time, like, "What more can I do?" And there is so much that you can do, whether it is just talk to someone at the school pickup line about this and get on the same page, make a pact with them that you're all not gonna give your kids access to certain things until a certain age or if at all. But then that next step of contacting your elected officials and asking them what they're doing related to this topic, and you're making it so easy. You answered all my questions and kind of made that through line of what's the problem in their state specifically? What are the gaps? Here's who to contact. Here's what to send them. Here's a bill that they could propose that could solve the problem. That's incredible resources for parents and making it really easy because it's overwhelming. Even me coming into this a year and a half, 2 years ago with very, very little knowledge of the legislative process, like it can be overwhelming and there's words used that you don't know. Thank you for creating and investing in all of that for parents. I do want to ask lastly, related to legal action, law enforcement, if this something happens to your child, if your child is contacted by a predator online, at what point should the parents let law enforcement know? And how important is it to do that?
It's very important to let law enforcement know. The other thing that they should do is make sure they try to save everything.
Yes,
No,
screenshots. Yep.
sometimes children they just say, "Okay, let me get rid of this before my parents see it," or
Yeah.
whatever. I want it gone, and you want them to save everything. Another thing, as I said, I had a meeting with the National Children's Alliance yesterday, and that they oversee all the child advocacy centers in the United States.
Mhm.
Well, many of those child advocacy centers have like compacts with the FBI. So that when the FBI, when these cases are reported, and I would say they should report them through the cyber tip line.
Yeah, at
Okay, so
NECMEC. So that'll be in it. Yep.
right,
Hmm.
that definitely should be done.
Okay.
They can call, their local law enforcement, but, they should also report through NCMEC, and then I would contact their local child advocacy center.
Okay.
There's like 960 of them in the United States right now, so you will
Okay.
find one in your state, and many of them have the relationship with the, FBI, so
Okay.
that, and you need to do that because you wanna protect your children. If there's images or videos, you wanna use Take It Down by NCMEC to try to get those things offline. You wanna try to hold the offenders and, accountable so that they're not out there doing this to more children, and, you wanna protect your child and stop this victimization from reoccurring.
Yeah, and I
So
think it's important it's all anonymous, right? So your child as a minor, you're
yes,
not blasting them, out in the public on this. And then also, even if it didn't end up being, traumatizing or something for your child, a big deal, you may be like, "Oh, I caught it early." That predator is targeting dozens of other kids. So it's really important to report them and take these steps to protect other children too. And
that's
so
right.
I know a lot of parents will hesitate because they don't want to re-traumatize their child. Maybe their child has to have a conversation with law enforcement about it, and that's scary. But remind your family members that we're doing this to protect your child and other children. It's really important.
And that and again, the message to parents, the children are not alone in this. You're in this together. It's
Yeah.
never the child's fault.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
I I think that will help calm the child's anxiety, or if they have it, or guilt, um, but also just knowing that they have the support of the parents and that the parents are doing something to stop the exploitation from occurring to other children
Yeah.
is also, I think, empowering in a way too.
Mhm.
So we definitely encourage that, as soon as possible. But again, it's sort of like, and another message that, I think put out to tell your children is very often the sextortion or could turn into financial extortion. Do not pay.
Do
Tell
not
your
pay. Right.
children, if somebody wants money, you come to me, you do
Mhm.
not pay. I mean, there's just messages like that that if you keep reinforcing those things with your children, they will understand them,
Yeah.
and they will say, "Okay, wait, this is something mom or dad told me I
Mhm.
should look out for. I think I better tell them." And
Yeah.
keep that communication going.
Mhm.
It's not just, I say teachable moments. If you have the news on and something comes up,
Mhm.
okay, what would you do if this happened? Do you know anyone that this happened to?
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the safety, if parents are just approaching this in not a scary or threatening way, but in a
Yeah.
safety way. My
Right.
job is to protect you and take care of you. My role is to keep you safe.
Mhm.
Now, and I think sending out those safety messages will, one, bring children comfort, but will also say, "Oh, that's not safe. I better go talk to mom or dad." And that's
Yeah.
what we want.
Yeah. Say it so much that they're like, "Oh, mom, I know." Then you're saying it enough.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Is there anything that we didn't cover? There's so many resources that I have to include in this episode, but anything you wanted to make sure parents take away today?
The other thing that is important for parents to understand is that if they're concerned, going back to the other end of the scale about their children's behavior, there are supports. And I would say also call the local child advocacy center, because sometimes they may not be, their children may be have problematic sexual behavior. And as a nation, we're still not really wanting to talk about that end of the spectrum, and we
Yeah.
really need to,
Yeah.
because we need to stop the behavior and get the children support they need. And when you look at the research, and Elizabeth Lay Tourneau, who's a colleague of mine, and we've actually funded some of her programs, she works extensively with youth with problematic sexual behavior. And if you can get children the support they need early on, the
Mhm.
vast majority of these behaviors can be extinguished.
Yeah.
And
And
and and s
problematic sexual behavior, I mean, I've had teachers tell me, like, in class, like, young boys will make, like, grunting, moaning noises, and they got it from some pornographic material they were served, and then everyone's copying them but don't know what they're doing, and so it's things, like, as innocent as that, but and then it, gets worse from there, but this is something that's pretty common.
Yeah, and again, if you go back to that study I referenced, the majority of people that were offenders innocently came across child sex abuse material when they were not looking for it.
Right.
And then you have to think, what impact did that have on the child? And the other, sad thing is that, as we know, pornography has become increasingly more and more sadistic and violent,
Yeah.
and children are seeing that and being shocked by that. And we really just need to find ways to keep them as safe as possible, keep them offline,
Mhm.
talk to them about coming to parents if they see something like this.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll hear, especially dads, be like, the kids are going to watch the porn. Boys are going to watch porn at some point. It's fine. Like, it's just part of, life." And I just want to say, try to explain to them the violence and incestual stuff that's getting served to children and what that
That's
does
right.
to their brain development, and dulling that prefrontal cortex so that they constantly need more and more heightened experiences, and that's what can lead them down a path to becoming a child predator, is their brain is so dulled to the content that they're seeing that they need more and more and more. So this makes sense from the conversations that I've had with neuroscientists and people that understand the brain development side of it.
That's right. You've hit the nail on the head, Nikki. Absolutely. What we're seeing is, one, it's the images or videos or whatever it is. They're more graphic, they're more violent, they're sadistic, but they're also giving children a very unreal
Mhm.
sort of mindset of what healthy sex is. That they
Yeah.
think, oh, this is what sex is, and it's
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
It's the
And then
exact opposite of what healthy sexual relationships should be.
yes, that
So
is
so
just
it goes back again with keep them off
Yeah.
Keeping children
I mean, I
off.
was and just to close out that convo, I was just reading a book called The Tech Exit by Claire Morell. It's a new book. And she was talking about a study or survey of young teens. And the girls were asked what they think is normal about a sexual encounter. And they said they think it's normal to be choked and to be controlled and all of these kind of violent things. And that's a teenager talking about what they think is normal about a sexual encounter. And so these exposures to pornography, whether it be a porn site or just literally all of the porn that is on social media right now, it is not safe. It's not good for their brain development and for setting them up for success at a healthy relationship one day. So we have to, right, it's back to keeping them off of it, but also having the conversations and make sure they know what's safe and what's normal. And we have to have those sex talks that maybe our parents didn't have with us because we were able to figure it out without all of this bad stuff coming at us.
That's right, and there's, another website that I was on recently looking through, it was called
Mm.
internetmatters.org, but
Mhm.
they had an interesting sort of quick read for parents
Okay.
on how to talk to your kids about pornography
Okay, good.
and what to do.
Yeah.
Because back to your point, there's been 2 research studies that I read recently on college-aged women,
Mm.
and sadly, it was the percentages were outrageous. It was something like over 40% said that during sex, they had recently been choked, or hit or some other type of violence done to them.
Yeah.
And that was just and going back to your point, people repeat what they see, what they think is normal, and
Yeah.
we've got to stop it. It's
Yeah.
it's just reached a sort of in my mind a break point
Mhm.
where we have to say this. We have to protect our children. This is unacceptable. We have to hold platforms accountable.
Yeah.
We have to try to stop the public health crisis with adults who are perpetrating, with youth who are developing behaviors, and we have to teach children and
Yeah.
teachers and parents and concerned adults how to surround the children with love and care,
Mhm.
and so that they feel safe in coming forward if something happens to them. But
Yeah.
it's child sexual abuse is preventable.
Mhm.
That's the thought I think to leave you with.
Yeah.
It is preventable, and we all have to take part in the solution to stop it, whether that's working with your children all the way up to contacting the local politicians or the federal legislators saying, "Enough is enough.
Mhm.
This has gotta stop." But
Yeah.
we can all do something to change this. It is preventable.
Thank you. And I hope that parents feel heavily resourced after this episode. I'm going to include a million links in the episode notes, but also knowing that it's not all on us. There is lots of work being done to put pressure on the companies and on lawmakers to help support us, but that we also need parents' voices in that fight. And that I think is what's making a difference in the last year or two in pushing through legislation is parent voices and sharing our stories and our struggles. And so to Mary, thank you and your team for your tireless advocacy and your work protecting children. There's really nothing more important to me. And parents everywhere I know are grateful to you. So thank you so much for this conversation.
It's my pleasure. And one, it's an honor to work for childhood. This foundation will stop at nothing to try to find new innovative ways to protect children. But I also want to thank you for your podcast and for putting so much information out there in such an easily digestible way that parents and others that are just concerned about children and their lives can access it. So thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that.